This must be horrible for a guy like you, who you spent your whole life talking about how government tries to do too much, which it does, and spends too much. And here you have Trump, who is the Republican, who is aggrandizing more power than anybody, as we just talked about. And on the other side, you have the guy running in New York, Mamdani, right? Okay, who's like a straight-up communist. I mean, he is. He talks about, the things that communists say. I mean, he wants free grocery stores, free buses.
I want him to win.
You want him to win?
Yeah. I think every 20 years or so.
Wait.
We need it.
Is this going to be a country that I don't recognize in 5 to 10 years if we don't have these two pillars? If we don't, where are the Democrats going with this? If Mamdani is the face of the Democrats on the East Coast and Katie Porter is the face on the West Coast, I don't know if that's great politically for that party.
Maher is directly targeting Zohran Mamdani, and this time the warning is hard to ignore. To him, this is not just another loud progressive voice. This is a politician pushing New York toward higher taxes, larger government, and a clear challenge to private property. His message is simple. If this represents the future of democratic politics in America's largest city, then the risk is already visible. And once ideas like these move from talking points into real power, the consequences arrive quickly. So if you are ready for the full breakdown, let's get straight into it.
The guy he just brought up, that's who you're all going to have to answer for. So I got to get your answer. This is Mamdani. If you've been not following the news, he won the Democratic primary in New York, so he is certainly likely to be the next mayor. We don't know. I mean, there's a lot of opposition because we've never had someone this radical. Some of the things he says, prisons were obsolete. What purpose do they serve? I could think of a couple. The NYPD is racist, anti-queer, and a major threat to public safety. I think most people think cops are protecting their public safety, even though there's issues and problems with the police department. Do you like capitalism? No. We've never had a guy quite like this. He quotes Marxist, each according to their need. I mean, that's straight up communism. Whether you call it the abolition of private property, you call it housing guarantees, it's preferable to what is going on right now.
Maher was warning people about Mamdani long before election season became serious, and now that warning seems more accurate with each passing day. He noticed the warning signs early, especially the type of politics that sounds caring at first but ends with taxpayers carrying the burden. Think back to when he warned Democrats not to fully back Kamala Harris. They ignored it, acted confident, and faced political consequences. That is why this matters. Maher often spots weak strategies before others deal with the results. And if he is right again, Mamdani's rise could become another mistake Democrats fail to stop in time.
Is this going to be a country that I don't recognize in 5 to 10 years if we don't have these two pillars? If we don't, where are the Democrats going with this? If Mamdani is the face of the Democrats on the East Coast and Katie Porter is the face on the West Coast, I don't know if that's great politically for that party.
This is not just a political issue for Democrats. In Maher's view, it becomes a national concern when one of the main parties builds its future around heavy spending and extreme tax policies. With Mamdani gaining attention on the East Coast and more far-left energy rising elsewhere, the party appears to be shifting toward redistribution instead of practical solutions. That is more than a political change. It can affect the entire national balance. America works best when both parties offer realistic ideas, not when one side supports policies that discourage success and increase dependency while calling it fairness. The country needs a Democratic Party that can compete with practical thinking, not one focused on extreme tax plans. It can recover, but only by returning to what once made it trusted: balance, realism, and freedom. Right now, it seems to be replacing those with ideology. And if that continues, it will impact not only the party, but the system itself.
Let me tell you about the story that liberal algorithms locked out. Her name is Sia Weaver. And if you ask anyone in the blue sky bubble who that is, they'll look at you like a turkey looking up at the rain. But she's kind of important in New York, being Major Mamdani's chief of the Office to Protect Tenants, and since Mamdani's big issue is the rent's too damn high, yes, he stole this guy's act. It's a very key appointment in the most important city in the country, which is also our financial center. It matters that the mayor stands by, and I assume stands with, someone who says things like, If you don't believe in the government's sacred right to seize private property, it's over.
Yes, this is exactly the type of messaging that concerns Maher. Attacking private property is not just a bold slogan. It reflects a deeper mindset focused on control and taxation. That is why this moment matters. Once people within a political group start treating ownership itself as the issue, the discussion shifts away from reform. It becomes about power. In Maher's view, that is the real signal. A radical tax approach does not stop at raising rates or increasing spending. It starts viewing personal success and ownership as problems to be controlled and redistributed. That is what worries him, because when this type of thinking gets close to real authority, the result is not practical leadership. It becomes ideological control presented in a polished way.
Seize private property. Home ownership is racist. Elect more communists. Private property, especially home ownership, is a weapon of white supremacy. Really? Even among the 20 million black Americans who own their own home? I mean, these are the kind of utterances I might forgive as something a dumb white girl said while she was at Bryn Mawr. Because it's the kind of privilege hating you can only learn for $95,000 a year. But these are statements made as an adult. Yes, for co-eds from elite private colleges, you're only a lesbian until graduation, but the communism lasts a lifetime.
That is also why Maher sees Mamdani as more than just a local New York figure. To him, Mamdani represents a sign that part of the Democratic base is becoming more comfortable with heavy taxation, redistribution, and government-driven solutions. That is what gives this issue national importance. If this kind of agenda is being accepted in a major city like New York, then it is no longer just a local issue. It becomes a preview of what might be promoted across the country. What sounds positive in activist language often sounds very different to regular voters who hear a simpler message: higher taxes, more control, and being told it is progress. Maher warns that the more Democrats treat this as bravery, the more disconnected they become from voters they still need.
One of the things that we've said beyond saying that we're going to a sanctuary city for LGBTQIA plus workers, beyond saying that we're going to establish an office of LGBTQIA plus affairs, is also that we're going to provide $65 million in funding for gender-affirming care, the same amount of funding that the federal government threatened to pull out from local providers for that kind of work. And in this moment especially, if we want to fight the Trump administration, we have to do so by fully funding our own services, taxing the wealthiest workers and corporations.
This is why Maher believes Mamdani could damage Democrats from within. He understands that when the party moves too far left, it begins losing the moderate voters it depends on, especially when that shift includes high taxes and controversial spending priorities. A large part of Donald Trump's support came from voters reacting against progressive overreach on social issues. Now Mamdani is supporting a $65 million plan to expand gender-related healthcare, including services for both young people and adults. That is not just risky politics. It shows how this approach works: more spending, more messaging, and more cost passed to the public. That is why Maher sees it as an advantage for Republicans and a clear sign that the left is losing focus on balance and everyday concerns.
This must be horrible for a guy like you, who you spent your whole life talking about how government tries to do too much, which it does, and spends too much. And here you have Trump, who is the Republican, who is aggrandizing more power than anybody, as we just talked about. And on the other side, you have the guy running in New York, Mamdani, right? Okay, who's like a straight-up communist. I mean, he is. He talks about, you know, the things that communists say. I mean, he wants free grocery stores, free buses.
I want him to win.
You want him to win?
Yeah.
On the surface, it all sounds appealing. Soft language, moral framing, bold promises, and a style of politics that makes a heavy tax agenda seem caring. But once you look beyond the slogans, the picture becomes more concerning. Mamdani's vision may excite supporters, but to those familiar with similar ideas, it feels very familiar. It follows the same pattern with updated presentation. That is Maher's point. The messaging sounds new, but the approach is the same. Raise taxes, increase control, and hope reality matches the plan.
It is the dead of winter. Another snowstorm is coming, and homeless encampments are still a critical problem in Mayor Mamdani's New York. So how is the mayor going to deal with it? Political reporter Marcia Kramer took her questions to Mamdani in this story that you will see here only on CBS News New York.
They are an eyesore. CBS News New York discovering homeless encampments, 2 on the Upper West Side, 2 in Hell's Kitchen, with many wondering how the new mayor will deal with the twin problems of finding a humane solution and optics that make it look like the city is out of control. This man, afraid to show his face, says he's called 311 repeatedly about the 2 encampments on West 45th Street.
They take the call like they're supposed to, but nothing's really happening.
How do you feel about the fact that nothing's happening?
Well, I don't feel good about it because I've been in this neighborhood for 3 decades.
Yes, socialism has failed many times, which is why many people reject it, especially when it appears as another tax-heavy solution. It continues to return because each new generation is offered the same promise in a slightly different form. But the issue with socialism is not only about policy. It relates to human behavior. People need motivation to create, compete, and improve. Remove that incentive, equalize outcomes artificially, and rely on government control to create fairness, and productivity quickly declines. Systems become larger, inefficiency increases, and corruption can grow. The system that promises fairness often delivers stagnation instead. History has tested this many times, and the outcome rarely matches the promise. That is why Mamdani's approach may sound positive in theory, but in practice it can weaken quickly. And when economic freedom declines, overall progress follows. Eventually, everyone feels the impact.
I think every 20 years or so,
Wait.
we need every 20 years or so, we need a conspicuous, confined experiment with socialism so we can crack it up again. Socialist slogan used to be, workers of the world unite, you have nothing to lose but your chains. The new socialist slogan is, trust us, this time it won't be a mess.
That is why Maher's final message goes beyond Mamdani, beyond New York, and beyond one election. He is encouraging people to step outside their views and judge ideas based on results, not presentation. But his warning is especially directed at the left, where many people operate within closed belief systems. In these spaces, every new tax plan is labeled as compassion, criticism is dismissed as fear, and failed outcomes are ignored instead of addressed. Maher argues that this leads people to become confidently mistaken. When disagreement is treated as a threat, facts are no longer evaluated objectively. They are filtered through ideology. No democracy can stay strong when slogans replace critical thinking, when spending replaces real solutions, and when emotion outweighs evidence. This kind of thinking does not just harm the left. It prevents it from seeing the real cost of the policies it supports. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next.
Resolution. Here's one. Get out of your media bubble. The most frustrating thing that happens to me whenever I'm off is people I run into want me to do my job, which I'm on vacation from, privately in restaurants and at parties, and, well, the bathhouse is a separate situation. But look, I'm happy to share my opinions wherever, except for this. Everybody, left and right, is only half informed.
Overall, this video presents Bill Maher's warning as a larger concern about where democratic politics may be heading. It is not only about one politician like Mamdani, but about a wider shift toward higher taxes, stronger government control, and policies that may sound good in theory but struggle in real-world results. Maher's main message is that once these ideas move from speeches into actual power, the impact becomes serious and often negative. He argues that ignoring past failures, dismissing criticism, and focusing too much on ideology instead of practical outcomes can lead to long-term damage. In the end, the video frames this as a choice between balanced, realistic policy and a more extreme direction that could push voters away and weaken the system over time.